prior to 1948 and the establishment of the state, 1944. The lowest point, concentration camp. In Bergen-Belsen, a group of prisoners got together to hold a Pesach Seder of some sort. Exactly what form it took, it's hard to imagine. But they held a Pesach Seder, and for the occasion, they actually had a special prayer composed by some rabbis, a prayer to be said for the eating of bread on Leil HaSeder. People wrote down this prayer. Can you see this? I hope that the screen sharing worked.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. People wrote it down to spread the word amongst the inmates of the camp. I'm not going to read it, and some of these little pieces of scraps of paper on which they wrote it down survived. I'm not going to read it all to you. I'm going to tell you the gist of this tefillah. It says, before eating your chametz at the Pesach Seder, you must say with great kavod, great feeling, Avinu shebashamayim, you gave us the mitzvah to eat matzah. Through no fault of our own, we cannot do this. But you gave us another mitzvah, not to eat chametz. Through no fault of our own, we cannot do this. But you also gave us another mitzvah. Avinu shebashamayim, you commanded us to stay alive. We will now fulfill your will. At that point, each person would pick up his piece of bread, say hamotzi, and eat. I've told the story dozens of times, and I still get goosebumps. It's chilling. Now, I was wandering around in Jerusalem some years ago, and there was a guy on the sidewalk. There were some sellers on the sidewalk selling their wares. They must have opened up an attic somewhere, a boydom somewhere, discarded suitcase, and there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of old envelopes and letters. Knowing myself as I do, I said, that's it. I'm stuck here for the day. And I sat there sifting through the letters. Now, of course, they weren't expensive. They didn't want much money. It was all discarded letters. And what did I find? I found an envelope, no letter inside it, but an envelope containing written to a young girl in Bergen-Belsen, Ingeborg Scherbel, a young girl in the children's house of Bergen-Belsen. I was so moved by this. I took the letter home, the envelope, no contents, and I was desperate. I felt a calling to know what happened to this girl, a young girl in the children's house of Bergen-Belsen. I went back to that sidewalk in Jerusalem. There were still hundreds of letters there, but I went back maybe a week or two later and I started to dig. And sure enough, I found another envelope to the same girl, but this time it is sent to her from Palestine in Palestine. Can you see that? It's the stamp is a Palestinian stamp. So I felt
Please mute yourself.
Could you make me a piece?
So I felt reassured that
David, can you unmute yourself?
Sorry, at which point did I end up being muted?
I don't know exactly what you.
Okay, did I say that I have okay, so I said that
You found the second, you went back, you found the envelope. She
Okay.
lived, you showed us the Palestine.
Okay,
stamp.
correct. So she had made it to Israel, this young girl, with the help of Henrietta Soul, the wonderful woman who helped the youth make Aliyah. Now, I kept digging, and I'm going to show you some of these treasures I found amongst the discarded letters. So we start off in 1944 in Bergen-Belsen. We moved to pre-state Palestine, and now another letter. This letter, don't forget there were hundreds of letters. I didn't have time to read them all, but this one grabbed my attention because if we have a look at the date, can you see the date?
What's the month?
Okay, so the month, so it's 1948, the 12th of the 5th.
5th, okay.
The 12th of May, 1948. On what day was the state established? What date? Does anybody know? So we're not going to all unmute ourselves, I guess, but on the 14th of May. So this letter was sent on the 12th of May, 2 days, just 2 days before the establishment of the state. I grabbed that letter because in the hope that there would be something in the contents of this letter where she would refer to this momentous occasion about to occur. And sure enough, she does. 2 days before the establishment of the state, this is what she writes. She writes, Zalman Chavivi, my dear Zalman, Ba'od shlosha yamim, in 3 days, you can see that I've circled it, in 3 days, Nye Ezrachim b'Medina Yehudit, we will be citizens of a Jewish state, free and independent. Ha'im ze chazon olamim, is this just a dream, a vision? This is too phenomenal for words. However, did you notice the discrepancy? Even without muting yourself, pick up a hand or something. Did you notice what was wrong there?
She said 3 days.
Right. She sent the letter 2 days before Ben-Gurion announced the state. And she writes with great excitement that in 3 days' time, we will have a state. 2 days before my birthday, I don't get muddled up and think my birthday is in 3 days' time. What is this? What happened? Did she make a mistake? What happened? No, she did not make a mistake. I'm now going to tell you why she thought the state would be established in 3 days' time and not 2. And not 2. So, no screen sharing for a couple of minutes. I just want to tell you the phenomenal story of the events leading up to Ben-Gurion announcing the state. Ben-Gurion wanted to announce the Jewish state of Israel. It was a very dangerous thing to do because as soon as he would do that, America was going to withdraw support and the Arab countries were all going to attack. Other people said, no, we have to, but he wanted to establish the state. Other people said, we cannot. Ben-Gurion said, this is our only chance. There was no Knesset, there was no government. There were 13 men, a provisional government. In Hebrew, they were called Minhelet Ha'am, the provisional government of Ben-Gurion and other men, 13 men that had to make this decision. They got together to debate it. And the majority said, we do not establish a Jewish state. We're not ready for it. It's suicidal. Ben Gurion said, we have to. And he argued and argued. They argued for hours. And then they took a break. During the break, Ben Gurion stood in the corridor. And as soon as he saw somebody coming who had opposed the establishment of a state, he would grab him by the collar, push him to a corner, and argue with him. And one by one would try to convince the naysayers to side with him. After the break, they took a revote. And the majority said, we'll go with Ben Gurion. In 3 days' time, we'll establish a state. What was the majority? Not 9-1, not 8-2, it was 6-4, a tiny majority. If Ben Gurion not had managed to convince one of those people, we would not have had the state. But he pushed it through, and now it's the big rush. On the 15th of May, they would establish the state. 6th of Iyar. And then they realized, Shabbos, that date is Shabbos. So Ben Gurion says, no problem. We're going to bring it forward a day. I'm going to surprise everybody. I'm going to surprise the Americans. I'm going to surprise the Arabs. I'm even going to surprise the Israelis. And we're going to establish the state early on Friday afternoon before Shabbos comes in. 4 o'clock, we're establishing the state. So now there's a mad rush. He says, where are we going to do this? Okay, we go in Tel Aviv, in the Museum of Tel Aviv. That's where we'll do it. Everybody, you've got to charge there and get the place ready. They don't yet have a speech for Ben Gurion written. They have nothing ready yet. So they're busy work out a Megillat Atzmaut, the Independence Charter, the Declaration. Ben Gurion says, okay, guys, time is running out. Friday afternoon, 4 o'clock, you all have to be there. He turns to his secretary, Ze'ev Sharf, and he says, Ze'ev, listen, order 10 taxis. Get everybody out of here at 3:30, take them to the Tel Aviv Museum. They have to be ready there at 4 o'clock. We'll be declaring the state. Ze'ev says, fine. Ze'ev orders the taxis and goes into an adjoining room to make last-minute adjustments to the declaration which Ben Gurion will read. The taxis take everybody out of there. No time to go home and shower. Charge straight there. Ben Gurion's taxi takes him via home so he can fetch his wife, Paula. They arrive there. It's an empty room. No flag, nothing. They say, wait a minute. There was an old flag in the other place, in the other building where we were having our debate. They rush back. They grab a flag, but it's filthy dirty. It's Friday afternoon. They run around. They find a dry cleaners that's still open. They find a cleaner. They say, you've got to wash this now. They wash the flag and run off with the wet flag to the Israel Museum in Tel Aviv. And they hang up the flag. They find a picture of Herzl and they hang it up. The room is still undecorated, but they say, well, we're in a museum. We'll borrow exhibits. They get the room ready. Where will people sit? They go to the coffee shop next door and they tell the owner, listen, we are from the provisional government. We are about to establish a state and we're confiscating, we are borrowing all of your chairs. Customers can drink their coffee standing. And they haul off all the chairs from any coffee shop in the vicinity and they set up the room. Whew. Now, they're sitting there. It's already 3:45, and Ben Gurion is sitting 15 minutes to go, and he will stand up and announce the state. What is he going to read? This declaration, which they had written so hurriedly. Don't forget the secretary, this man, Ze'ev Sharf, he stayed behind to make last-minute adjustments. He finishes making the adjustments, and he suddenly realizes, I ordered taxis for everybody except for myself, and everybody's gone. And they're waiting for me in the Israel Museum to bring them the declaration. He charges out of the building, holding the declaration, and tries to get a car to stop and to hitch a ride. and cars aren't stopping, and it's Friday afternoon just before Shabbos, and everybody's rushing past. He stops a car, and he says to the driver, please, you have to help me, you have to take me to the Israel Museum. And the driver, well, you know, I just nipped out of the house to go buy some nuts and some hummus for Shabbos. He says, listen, I'm from the provisional government. I'm holding the declaration for the state of Israel, which we're going to declare. You've got to take me. So the driver says, fine. They're charging through the streets of Tel Aviv to get there by 4 o'clock. Ben Gurion is sitting there. It's 10 to 4. He's sitting there as if everything is under control. Such a gibor. He's sitting there calmly, or acting calm at least. 3:51, 3:52. Sheriff has not yet arrived with the declaration. Sheriff is charging through the streets of Tel Aviv, and a traffic cop pulls them over to the side of the road for speeding. Says, licenses, please. And the driver says, hate to admit it, officer, I don't have a license. The officer says, right, everybody out the car, both of you. Ze'ev, sheriff, holds up the declaration. He says, listen, officer, we are about to, this is the declaration of a Jewish state. If we don't get there now, it's on your head. The officer says, what? Get out of here, charge, drive as fast as you can. So they're on their way to the Israel Museum. 3:56. 3:57, Ben Gurion is sitting waiting. 3:58. 3:59, the doors burst open. Sheriff charges in, panting, hands the declaration to Ben Gurion. Ben Gurion reads the declaration. He says, on this day, we have a Jewish state. That was at 4 o'clock. Everybody signs. 4:30, it's all over. They go home to put the cholent, to switch the cholent on. And that is the story. Now, what is wrong with this picture? You know, we have our Megillat Atzmaut. Beautiful, you know, this written on parchment, this Atzmaut, which they all signed. How could that be? All Ben Gurion had, he was at 1 minute to 4, he was given the piece of paper which Sheriff had been busy making corrections on till the last minute. And you know what the answer is? Try not to fall off your chairs. They signed on an empty document. There was nothing written there. I don't know if there are any lawyers amongst you guys, but what do you think of that for a system? First, everybody signs. Afterwards, we'll write what we signed for. But that's how it was. You know, they talk. The Mishnah talks about what was created ben hashmashot, on the hours just before Shabbos came in. The country was created just in those last minutes. Everything upside down. But that's how it happened. Now we understand why our friend, she didn't really get it wrong, but she wrote with great excitement about in 3 days' time, we will have a Jewish state. Little did she know that it was going to happen in 2 days' time because I had to bring it early for Shabbos. She would wake up on Shabbos morning and it's a done deal. Took everybody by surprise, the entire world. I looked up the address from which she wrote this letter. She lived a couple of 100 meters, just walking distance from where everything was happening, under her nose, and she didn't know. It's just too beautiful for words. Now, I'm going to move on to the next envelope. Here's another envelope I found there. You know, a sort of, you get onto a trail and then you follow it. So This envelope, what's interesting here, when she sent this letter, it has a fascinating stamp. The stamp says, Doar Ivri, Hebrew post, not Israeli post, not Palestinian post, Hebrew. What is that? Hebrew post. So here, let me tell you the story of this. We've already heard what happened with Ben Gurion and 30 men at the last minute establishing the state. But we didn't yet have stamps ready for the country. And there's no ways we could. It would have been illegal for us to print stamps while the British were still the ruling power. And we had but we had to have stamps ready for the first day of independence. Establishing a country without an effective working postal service is the same as nowadays trying to establish a country without an internet provider. You cannot do it. We had 3 problems. Problem 1, where and how would we print stamps without the British knowing? Problem number 2, what country would we write on the stamps? We didn't yet have a country. Ben Gurion and the other 12 guys hadn't yet decided on a name for the country. We take it for granted that it's Medinat Israel. But there were other names suggested: Eretz Tzvi, Yeshurun, Tzion, Ever, Medinat HaYehudim, Yehuda, Eretz Tzabar. I have a list of about 10 names that were proposed. In the end, 7-3 voted in favor of calling the country Medinat Israel, but it was not given. And when they needed to print the stamps, they had to print them now. They couldn't wait until Friday afternoon. So what did they do? Not enough paper, don't know what to print on the stamps, and nowhere to do it. One of these 13 guys, David Remez by name, he was in charge of communications, and he said, I'll tell you what, he made a plan. He got hold of some old, very primitive printing machines. He found an abandoned building in Tel Aviv, in the Sarona neighborhood. If any of you have ever been to Tel Aviv, Sarona, it's a beautiful area with eateries and restaurants now. It used to be a German neighborhood run by the Templars. The Templars. They found an abandoned building there and smuggled primitive printing material into printing machinery into the building. So now, without the British knowing, they could print stamps. What would they print on the stamps? David Remez said, I'll tell you what, we don't know what the country will be called. That we'll only know in a day or two, but we'll write Doar Ivri, Hebrew post. It's like the Shahakol for brachot. You know, you can't go wrong with it. It covers all bases. We'll do that. So on Sunday morning, we'll already be able to print the name of the country. Now, they've solved problem number 1 of how, when and how to print. They've solved problem number 2 of what to print. Now, paper shortage. Well, they go into the building, they set up the machinery, and do you know what they found in this building? This is what they see. The walls are plastered with posters of Hitler and Nazi propaganda everywhere. Piled up on the floor are pamphlets and flyers ready to distribute, waiting to welcome the Nazis to conquer Palestine and continue the Holocaust in Palestine. Well, obviously, at the end of the war, these people left the building. They left the country and escaped back to Germany. It turns out that the family, so they were a family of Templars. Templars, those are the names of the early Germans who arrived in Israel to set up the temple. They were called Templars. They used to wear hats like this. The Arabs cannot say P, they say B. Hence we have, for example, Panyas in the north of Israel, which we call Banyas. They couldn't say Templar. So this is, what kind of hat is this? A kova? Not temple, tembel, kova tembel. It turns out that this room, which had been, this room which had been occupied by a German Templar family who ran a printing press. And that is why they had all of this paper and posters ready to distribute. This is where they were printing it. Now, we had a paper shortage. How are we going to print the first run of stamps? I have chills through my body as I ask you. Do you see where this is going? The first run of Israeli stamps were printed on the back of Hitler's head, back of his face. They printed on the backs of these posters and cut them up. Poetic justice, to say poetic justice doesn't come close to describing the enormity of this. I can just see Hashem looking down from Shemayim and say, I arranged things well for you guys, huh? I know what I'm doing. It is too phenomenal for words. They printed these stamps, and that is the stamp I found. That's the envelope I found. She wrote it with a stamp saying Doar Ivri in those early stamps before we had actually knew what to print on them. The stamps were delivered in these trucks, and by witness accounts in many of the cities, when they brought these stamps, the rabbi of the shul would come out. He would blow the shofar and say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, sheheyanu v'kiyamanu v'gi'anu hazman hazeh. Now, that is how we established the state. For the 10th anniversary of the state, it was considered a very auspicious date, of course. 10th, when the country turned 10 in 1958, there were major celebrations. Now, this leads me to my next item. I was in the city of Ramle, walking through the market. There was a guy who spread a sheet in the dust and piled up on the sheet all kinds of old junk, which he was selling. Of course, I started to dig. And this is what I found. It's a beautiful book of children's illustrations. I will screen some of them with you in a minute. It turns out that what this is that for Israel's 10th anniversary, a competition was held throughout the country where children could send in their paintings. And 12 paintings were chosen, and each of those children won a little prize. And this is what I found. This portfolio is the copies of the 12 paintings, the 12 kids that won. I was so moved by this. And each painting depicts Israel through the eyes of a child in 1958. Little children, 10 years old mainly. In other words, a child who was 10 in 1958 was born together with the country. They share a birthday in 1948 and grew up hand in hand. And now the child paints his country and sends it in. And these are the 12 paintings. I bought the book. He wanted something like 3 shekels. I did not bother bargaining. I went home with the book. And I said to my wife something totally crazy. I said, Evita, I'm going to track down one of these kids. Maybe I can find one of them. He or she's now in his 70s. And I want to give them their painting. Give them back their painting and give them back their childhood. And hear what's become of them. And hear their story. My wife and I have been together since sweet 16. So she knows me well enough not to argue when I get crazy ideas. She's not necessarily going to spend her time with me on something like this, but she'll leave me to do it. So what information did I have? This is the cover of the book, Israel Children's Paintings. This is as much information I had for each painting. Basically nothing. The painting is called In the Garden, painted by Tal Yitzchaki, age 5.5 in Tel Aviv. My kid said, Abba, you crazy, get a life. Friend said, you're not going to find anybody. You're going to find a little girl whose surname was Yitzchaki in 1958 in the enormous city of Tel Aviv. And now 60 years later, you want to find her. She's probably married and changed her name. And even if she hadn't, find something constructive to do with your life. But I was determined to do this. I made hundreds of phone calls, emails. I phoned archives. I struggled with this for ages. And eventually, I phone a woman and I say, hi, you don't know me. My name's David. I have a very strange question for you. I want to know if, when you were 10 years old, if you entered a painting in a national children's competition. And she said, yes. I remember it vividly. I said to her, she said, but how do you know? I said, hang on, tell me, when last did you see that painting? She said, I haven't seen it since I entered it in the competition. I haven't seen it in 60 years. But I remember it vividly. She says, I painted a blue city. And from memory, she starts to describe her painting, and I'm holding it up in front of me. And she's describing in minute detail this exact painting. And I told her what had happened. She said, I've been waiting 60 years to tell my children and my grandchildren that when I was their age, I was a winner in a competition. And now at long last, I can show them. We got together for coffee, me, herself, and her husband. We intended to sit for half an hour to say hello and for me to give them a copy of the painting. We sat the whole morning. We just fell in love with each other. It was the most incredible meeting, incredible journey. I subsequently have tracked down seven of these 12 children. Each meeting is a book unto itself. But just to give you a little taste, this boy painted himself, imagined himself on the tractor of his kibbutz. When I spoke to him, I said, tell me, Yoav, did you ever fulfill your dream? Did you ever drive a tractor? He said, David, that's nothing. I was a fighter pilot for Israel. Never mind a tractor. I drove a fighter plane. So that's great, but it's not the same like a little boy wants to dig in the dirt. He said, David, that's nothing. I own a construction company. I said to him, and what was the prize you got? He said, I got some roller skates. They sent them to me on the kibbutz. No one in the kibbutz had seen such a wonder before. But of course, it was a kibbutz in the 1950s. He probably only got them once a month after every kid got his turn, you know. Now, Yossi had a very moving story to tell. Yossi arrived, actually Yossi's picture I'll show you in a minute. Yossi arrived from Poland with his older brother and was sent to a kibbutz where they had an uncle. They arrived there without parents. Yossi and his older brother, without parents, in Israel on a kibbutz, and knew no Hebrew. But he loved to paint. This little boy who had just arrived, he had only been in the country for a few months with his brother and couldn't speak a word. He painted a picture, and his teacher took the painting and sent it off to the competition. And a few months later, Yossi was one of the 12 winners. Can you imagine what this did for him? And what had Yossi painted? He had painted a scene which had made such an impression upon him a few months before. There he is, looking at the front of the boat as it arrives in the harbor of Haifa. Well, when I was told, Abba, get a life, I tell you, for me, this is not only getting a life, this is giving a life. What this has been for myself and for these children who are now in their 70s to receive these paintings and tell their story. Many of them I haven't even met yet because of the corona year. And we're all waiting, but we're in touch with each other, and now we'll meet face to face. Some of them I had contacted before corona and we met, but there's still more very emotional meetings, which I'm looking forward to. Okay, now we're going to go even further in time to 1967, the Six-Day War. A glorious time, a euphoric time in the country, and deservedly so. And it all happened so fast in that month of June in 1967, and everybody visited the country and came back with the olive wood camels and the copper ashtrays and the olive wood counters. And it happened so fast. There isn't time to go into the whole story, but we thought we were going to be wiped out. If any of you have been to Israel, Independence Park, just near the bottom of the King David Hotel, Independence Park, in the days prior to the Six-Day War, do you know what was happening there? Citizens were there day and night digging graves because we didn't know, we had a major problem. We didn't know where we would be able, where would there be enough graves for everybody. We had no idea how Hashem would help us. Well, one day I was in Yafo, walking on the sidewalk, and I see a lady across the road take out an enormous sack, not a packet, a sack, like a sort of agricultural sack, kind of empty it out, tip it out on the pavement. And she says, "Chatzi shekel lesefer." Every book costs half a shekel. It was old school books. So she wasn't going to get more than half a shekel for old school books. But you guys know me by now. I start to dig. And I find this book, which is, it's a book used by kids in 3rd grade for learning about the country. It has maps and explanations. And I'll have a look at the date, and I see from the date that this book was used by this little kid, 8, 9-year-old kid, during the Six-Day War. Okay. So I give the lady her half shekel and I start to look. What had happened, it's a book for learning, to teach kids about the country. But let's say they have this lesson once a week. Within 1 week, the book is obsolete. But we're already in the month of June. It's the end of the school year. No one's going to print out a new book. So what did the kid do? He made the changes himself. He penciled them in. Every page where there's a map of Israel, the kid made a new textbook for himself. This is also Bein Hashmashot in a way, because a week before the book was up to date. In 2 weeks' time, it's the end of the school year, and they'll throw those books away and print new ones. But this one was just in that tiny window of time in between, where the kid had to make his own adjustments. It's so beautiful. For half a shekel, I ask you. And if I wanted to sell the book, I wouldn't get more than half a shekel. Objectively speaking, it's worth half a shekel. To me, it's priceless. I can't put a value on it. This envelope here, everybody, and we're nearly going to have to come to the end. I wish I could sit with you guys for hours and hours and hours. Okay. This envelope, again, I found it discarded amongst old letters. Now, what is unique about this? This was sent, if you look at the date, it was sent on the 11th of June, 1967. Okay, now we're going to do some arithmetic. The Six-Day War broke out on Monday, the 5th of June. So let's count the 6 days. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th. On the 10th of June, on Shabbat, the war ended. So this, sent on the 11th of June, was sent on the first opportunity on Sunday following the Six-Day War. It says on it even, ceasefire. Okay, we didn't know it was an total end to the war yet, ceasefire. And we have this beautiful picture of the soldier and his little boy, his gun at rest, b'shalom. And I want to say something about this. You know, when we have had to fight, when we fought wars, we've had to fight. What can you do? We don't fight to win. We don't fight to be victorious. We fight so that we can have peace. En kamocha, Yisrael. This envelope could have had a picture of the Egyptian prisoners. It could have had a picture of our bombs. It could have had a picture of the Israeli soldier shooting the gun. It's a picture of what we fight for peace. Now, before we move to the final item, what I want to do is just a quick resume of what we have seen. We started off following the advice of Chazal that you start off at the lowest point before moving up. The letter that I found sent to the child in the Bergen-Belsen camp. Well, obviously we mean after the war, where a temporary sort of children's home hospital was set up there. Then we find a letter sent to her in Palestine, and I breathed a sigh of relief knowing that she had arrived home safely. Then I find a letter sent where she sends the letter is sent here 2 days before the declaration of the state, where she excitedly writes about the declaration in 3 days' time, because she didn't know that it would be brought forward early and that whole crazy rush just before Shabbos. And then we have the letter sent by Doar Ivri, Hebrew stamp, Hebrew post, because we didn't yet have a name for the country. And these first stamps were printed on the back of the Nazi propaganda. Delivering these stamps, rabbis came out when the truck of stamps would arrive, blow the shofar and say Shecheyanu. The book of children's paintings I found, the little information I had to go by, and how crazy it is that I managed to find 7 of the 12 kids. I might still find more. It's very difficult, believe me. The woman who remembered her painting and has been waiting to be reunited with it for 60 years. The little boy imagining himself driving the kibbutz tractor, who now owns a construction company and flew a fighter plane. Yossi, who arrived with his brother from Poland without Hebrew, and a few months later discovered that he was one of the winners because he had an insightful and compassionate teacher. Sareta, you'll really relate to this. How this teacher took his painting and changed the boy's life. The book where the child would have his weekly lesson in Israeli geography and history and had to make the updates himself. And what we fight for peace. To finish off, my wife is a lecturer at universities, at colleges. I went to fetch her one day. I was really, really hungry. She hadn't finished work. I was really hungry. So I went to the cafeteria to buy myself something to eat while she would finish her lectures. Walk into the cafeteria. On the right-hand side is the food. On the left-hand side is a bookcase with a sign, free books. So I said, okay, I'm going to go home hungry tonight. I'm not going to waste a single minute with eating. I want to go see what the books are. And amongst the books was a pile of Haggadot. Everyone had an old book, they could put it on the shelf. Somebody wanted a book, you just take it for free. I found a Haggadah. This Haggadah, it really piqued my curiosity. Haggadah printed for soldiers in the Israeli army, specifically. Rav Goren initiated and researched the Haggadah. And what happened is that in 1948, when the country was established, Ben Gurion approached Rav Goren and asked him to be the chief rabbi of the army. Rav Goren agreed, and what Rav Goren said what he has to do is to print a siddur for the soldiers. A siddur, a unique siddur, nusach achid, which would be good for soldiers of all different cultural backgrounds. Yemenites, Moroccans, Lithuanians, Hasidim, everybody, that they could daven together, because he was afraid that if each group davened separately, he was afraid that there would never be a minyan in the Israeli army. We've come a long way. Would you have dreamt what the Israeli army is now? So how many kippot and how many officers of room? It's amazing. But at the time, he was worried. So he wanted to print the siddur. He realized that was a long-term project. He wouldn't have time to print the siddur, but he said, at least meantime, I want a Haggadah to be ready for the first Pesach Seder. I want the Israeli soldiers to be able to hold a Pesach Seder together and not splinter off into groups. He made a couple of unique contributions to this Haggadah. One of them struck me and made such an impact on me. Rav Goren had a problem with the one line. We start off the Haggadah by saying, Halach ma'anya, this is the bread of affliction which we ate in Egypt. This year we are in exile, next year we will be in Israel. This year we are slaves, next year we will be free men. Rav Goren said, how will I sit in an army base surrounded by soldiers who are giving their lives and have friends who already gave their lives to allow me to sit in Israel as a free man? How will I say that? How will these soldiers react? They will be so insulted. But he couldn't remove the lines. They're part of a holy text. And he didn't know what to do. He started to search to see if he could find an alternate text. And in the Cairo Geniza, he found that for a short time, there was a different text in the Haggadah. During the time of the Beit Sheni, during the second temple period, when we came back to the land, they did not say, this year, Hashtahacha Shana Ba'a Ba'aret Israel, this year we are in exile, next year we will be in Israel. This year we are slaves, next year we'll be free men. They said, Etmol hayinu avadim. Yesterday we were slaves. Vahayom, and today, b'nei chorim. So what Rav Goren did is he said, I'm not removing the traditional text, but I'm adding this. And that's what he did. And that's what I say at our Pesach Seder these days. Now, if you consider it is only 4 years, just 4 years, from the Pesach Seder where they ate chometz in Bergen-Belsen with a special bracha for eating chametz, etc. 4 years later, Rav Goren has a problem at the other end of the spectrum, that we're in Israel and we're free men. And he wants a Haggadah to reflect that. Baruch Hashem, we have so much to be grateful for. Is Israel perfect? No. Am I perfect? No. Is my family perfect? No. But wow, so much to be grateful for. And thank you for letting me share my passion with you, everybody.
Wow. Oh, thank you, David. Thank you so very much for an amazing presentation, beyond what I was expecting.
Good.
Before we take questions where people can unmute themselves and ask, I just want to put in a little plug for David, that he puts on very interesting, unique shows in Israel. And I saw as a preview, like that he puts on entertainment, like if families are having maybe family reunions or guests, they make parties. He is in Israel. He's the entertainment. He plays instruments, this and that. And so anyone can feel free to contact him if you want to, if you travel to Israel and want to do something like that. You can see for yourself. It would be terrific. You're getting a lot of, so thank you, David. You're getting a lot of people saying thank you, Tizkela Mitzvot, Yasher Koach. Thank you very much. And now, would someone like to ask a question or make a comment?
And also, Sareta, you're very welcome to distribute my email or WhatsApp number, and I'm happy to make people to also, ask questions or give me information. I learn from other people just as much as I teach, then even afterwards, anytime, we can have contact. Yes. Yeah,
we actually had a family letter from, I think it was 1931 that I sent to David in the last few weeks.
Amazing.
That my great-grandfather had moved to Palestine from Chicago, and some relatives went to visit him, and it was a beautiful letter. So we scanned it and sent it to David. Maybe one day it will help him in one of his presentations. So maybe you have something like that too. Anybody? I can't see everybody. So does anybody have any questions?
Yes,
Michelle. Yeah.
I want to also say thank you very much. It was absolutely fascinating, stunning, actually. Thank you. My question is about, you mentioned that one of the, when they wanted to declare the independence of the state of Israel, one of the guys was running with the declaration and trying to get there on time. Yes. And they were stopped by a police officer. And he told the police officer, please let us go. We're declaring the independence of the state of Israel. Now, this was Palestine. It was under British rule. And I was wondering, did they have Jewish police officers? Why would the police officer be sympathetic to that?
What an excellent question. Excellent. First of all, the British, at this point, the British already were preparing to pull out.
Oh.
Okay, they were already preparing to pull out. However, even many years prior to this, there is a beautiful song about Tel Aviv. The song came out, I think, in the 1920s or 30s, 1920s or 30s, probably 1930s, praising Tel Aviv, in which the woman sings, and in Tel Aviv, you can even meet a policeman who is a Ben Brit. You can meet a policeman who's Jewish.
Oh,
He's just amazed by this. So you would have Jewish policemen, but I'll tell you something. Your question is so bamakom because we're not used to that. My son, when he was in the army, he was once by the train station, and it was time for mincha, and he was trying to get a minyan together. He sees a young guy with a kippah sitting on the bench, and he approaches him to ask, "Hey, if you haven't mincha yet, I'm trying to get a minyan together." The young guy sees my son coming in his uniform, and he gets all startled. And my son says, "What's wrong?" And the guy answers him in English, because he's a recent Ole from America. He says, no, I just, I got a fright when you approached me from the uniform. And then I heard you just wanted me to help make a minyan. He said, if I may, because this is a new concept for me.
yeah.
So, and he said, if I made aliyah, just so that a soldier can ask me to make a minyan, it's been worth it already.
Right. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Comments?
Yay. So, Michelle, thank you for the question. Yeah, there was that funny twilight time. You know, the British were 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Right.
I think everybody had a great time and enjoyed it so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Everybody.
Okay,
Okay, I'll be
so-
happy to have further contact with anybody.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone, have a wonderful day, a wonderful week.
Yes. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Great to see everyone.
Okay.
Great to see you all.
I wait till she lets us. I can leave now, but if you want to see more people.
Thanks, Sarita. That was totally amazing.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Totally and utterly amazing. Okay.
I'm
cool,
so
cool.
glad you joined today. Really glad.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. And Shavuot Tov.
Shavua tov. Take care, Michelle.
You too.
Suzanne, nice to see you. I mean, I'm not actually seeing you, but Barbara, good to see you. Esther. Yeah, unmute yourself. We can't hear you, Barbara. You need to unmute. Let's see if I can unmute you. I think I could unmute everyone.
She's
Barbara, you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself? I'm trying to figure out how to unmute you. Hold on. Maybe I could do it.
Got it.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Okay.
can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you were able to join us today.
Oh, it was very interesting. I really liked it.
Great, great. It is
Almost,
definitely. What?
I tried to mute my phone and I didn't do it right.
Don't
Anyhow,
worry about
thank
it.
you so much. It was so
You're
nice.
so welcome. Hope everyone can come next Monday night, a week from Monday night. I forgot to announce that. We're having the murals, the program about murals with Beth Sair. So
Well, that should be interesting.
I'm going to send it out again now that this one is over. I'm going to send it out again Monday night, the 26th, I think. I believe it's the 26th.
okay. We're on.
And it should be really, really good. She gave me a preview, so.
Thank you, Soretta.
Okay,
You
you're
got me
welcome.
up and dressed early.
Okay, have a good day, a good week,
Yeah,
everybody.
Thank you.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Thank you.
Brenda, I will call you about your email from last night or Friday, or I don't know if
Yeah,
I
I
responded. or
texted
not.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna respond
Okay.
to you,
We'll be in
okay?
touch. Okay.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having us.